Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yesterday, President Emerson Mnangagwa gave his State of the Nation address. I think many people were left absolutely speechless. He was talking of a totally different Zimbabwe from the reality on the ground. The country is facing serious economic problems. And yet, his State of the Nation address talked of a country that is prospering and stable. How anyone can be so at variance with the reality beggars belief. Here is what he was saying.
Is at the core of macroeconomic stability. The adoption of the Zimbabwe gold, the ZiG, in April 2024 this year, was an important step towards stabilizing the domestic currency anchored by our gold and precious metal reserves. It remains the duty of all of us to respect and abide by measures and instruments intended to maintain economic stability and tame inflation in our country. In response to the increased foreign currency pressures and in a bid to deepen the foreign exchange market, the Reserve Bank allowed for greater flexibility under the willing buyer, willing seller arrangement. The increased flexibility on the foreign exchange market is expected to further promote effective price discovery and encourage holders of foreign exchange to participate in the willing buyer, willing seller market. Government remains committed to backing the currency through setting aside 50% of royalties for building reserves. Our currency banking sector is on sounding footing with sufficient capital and liquidity buffers, while profitability, asset quality, and liquidity metrics have also remained stable. However, we note with concern the resurgence of parallel market activities driven by speculative tendencies. Corrective measures are being instituted to protect all Zimbabweans from economic disruptions. Together, let us lay a solid foundation for economic prosperity, peaceful development, and freedom from undue external interference.
The reality here is we have got a regime that will never admit that it has failed. The ZiG is not holding its value. He is talking of a strong ZiG, and yet it was the ZANU-PF regime itself that announced the ZiG at official rate, exchange rate, going from 13.75 ZiG to a US dollar to 24 ZiG to a US dollar. This is on the official exchange rate. On the parallel black market rate, that's been going from between 30 to even as high as 50 ZiG to a US dollar. Shops who are forced to sell at the official exchange rate have found it impossible to continue operating. Because as much as they would want to do according to the government rules, use the official exchange rate, the truth of the matter is, when they have sold in ZiG and they've got to restock, they have to pay for the new stock in the US dollar. They cannot get the US dollar from the bank at the official exchange rate. So they've got to go into the black market. They buy the US dollar at the black market rate of, say, 30 ZiGs to $1 US. Then they bring it back into their shop and they are forced to sell it at the official exchange rate, which until last week was 13 ZiG. That is an unbelievable loss, unsustainable loss. You can't buy something at 30 ZiG and then sell it at 13 ZiG. That is unsustainable. You're running at a loss. And this is why some of these shops, either they are empty, the shelves are empty, or some of them have decided to close shop altogether. The ZANU-PF can pretend all it wants that the economy is doing well. The reality is totally different. The truth of the matter is, this Mnangagwa government will never admit that it's failed to revive the country's economy, no more than it ever admitted that it rigged last year's elections. The regime is illegitimate. And it is no surprise at all that it maintains that things are working well when they are not. This is typical of a regime that is not accountable to anybody. Zimbabwe's problem, the heart of Zimbabwe's problem, is the failure to have accountable government. I can tell you now, if we have a regime that is accountable to the people, we have a chance of sorting out our teething economic and political problems. We have had 44 years since independence, and we have been stuck with the ZANU-PF regime because the regime was able to rig elections and stay in power. The need to cure ourselves of this curse of rigged elections and bad governance has never been more urgent than it is today. We have realized the problem and have tried to address and have tried to address it for a long time, but with very little success. If the truth be told, since the late 1990s, the people of Zimbabwe realized that we needed democratic changes in the country to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. And people have risked lives, livelihoods, and limbs to elect the MDC CCC leaders in the hope that they will bring about the democratic changes the nation was dying for to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. The truth of the matter is they failed to do so. It's been 24 years since MDC occupied the political stage. 24 years, including the 5 years in the 2008 to 2013 GNU. And yet, as we saw last year, ZANU-PF is still able to blatantly rig elections because MDC CCC failed to implement even one token reform. Where still they've been participating in these flawed elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy. The people of Zimbabwe have been slow in realizing what is going on here. And we've paid dearly for it. Because, like it or not, yes, we've had 44 years of ZANU-PF rigging the elections. But it must also be said the last 24 of which ZANU-PF has rigged the elections with the connivance of the MDC CCC leaders. And we, the ordinary people, have played our part in that we've participated in flawed elections to give the regime legitimacy. There's absolutely no excuse for it. There never was. The people of Zimbabwe must wake up to the reality that elections should not be just about we want to remove ZANU-PF. It's a lot more complex than that. Elections should be about electing opposition leaders who will wrestle power from ZANU-PF, who will implement the democratic reforms to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. So far, MDC CCC leaders have failed to do so. There was a time when Professor Jonathan Moyo once said, I think it was in 2008, that if there was a baboon and Robert Mugabe on the ballot, the people of Zimbabwe will vote for the baboon. I think it was accurate enough. It underlined that people were not paying any attention to who they were putting in Mugabe's place. The number one priority is to get Mugabe out. Now, with hindsight, after 24 years of opposition, political activism, one has got to realize that ZANU-PF has been smarter than the people. ZANU-PF has allowed the opposition, MDC, to participate in these flawed elections. If you want, has allowed the people of Zimbabwe to support and vote for the opposition. And the people have not been paying attention to whether or not the opposition is able to wrestle power from ZANU-PF. And that has been the reason why in 24 years MDC has failed to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. The people were so focused on, we want to vote for anybody as long as it's not ZANU-PF, when they should have been focusing on, we want to vote for somebody who will implement the reforms and end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. Because since the GNU, what Robert Mugabe successfully did was bribe the MDC officials to make them forget about the reforms and return for a few gravitron seats. And that is what the opposition has been doing. They've been participating in flawed elections for the sake of the few gravitron seats. That point has been made over and over again. But unfortunately, Zimbabweans have been slow at learning. This is a quotation that I've often used. This is from from David Coulthard's book. What David Coulthard is saying there is that the 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw. Why didn't they withdraw? Well, he explains it there. They could not withdraw because they could not trust the other half of the MDC leadership or a party to withdraw too. So in the end, they both ended up participating for the sake of the few gravitron seats they knew were on offer. So the opposition has been participating in flawed elections out of greed. They knew they were not going to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. They were not going to bring about the political change that the nation so desperately needed out of greed. So let me emphasize it again. The challenge here is not to elect anybody as long as it's not ZANU-PF. The real challenge is to elect the opposition that will implement the democratic reforms to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. Because as long as ZANU-PF is able to rig the elections, as Mnangagwa did last year, he will stay in power and he will do as he damn well pleases. And this is the reason why the country is in this mess. We cannot continue the way we have been doing our politics. We need to be a bit smarter, a lot smarter. The idea that we can somehow vote for Chamisa and he will stop ZANU-PF when we already know Chamisa is not contesting these elections for the sake of ending ZANU-PF's rule. All he wants is to win the few gravitron seats that are available, and that's all he cares about. Think about it. Thank you and have a good day.